Hey guys, thanks for showing up.
Thank you, Mr. Chris Thompson. I'm glad you like the music.
Yeah, about that. Listen, I know we've had a lot of fun over the years. We had a lot of good times together, but I guess there's no easy way to say this. We need to break up. Forgive me, I misspoke. What I meant to say was you need to break up.
Oh no! Why would you say something so cruel?
Well... Let me break it down. Oh, Weezer. What happened? You used to be so much fun. For 90s kids like me, you were one of the biggest staples of our childhoods and were instrumental into shaping our musical tastes. Hell, your specific brand of nerdy power pop was insanely influential on how mainstream music sounds even today. For the better, and for the worst. Whether you dug them or not, the impact their music had can't be denied. After grunge was starting to reach its expiration date, Weezer helped usher in a new wave of pop-punkers that would come to define the rock landscape from the mid-90s to the... O's? Zeros? What the fuck are you supposed to call that decade? Bands like Blink-182, Panic! At the Disco, and even Brand New probably wouldn't have gained nearly as much popularity if Weezer hadn't been there to help open the initial floodgates. Though, even I'll admit, that's kind of a mixed blessing.
What the fuck is this shit?
A lot of their earlier hits are still staples on rock radio, and many people cite them as one of the most important and influential bands of the last 20 years. To a lot of us, myself included, Weezer holds a very dear place in our hearts. So what the fuck happened? Seriously, when I would reminisce about Weezer in, say, 2001, it would bring back fond memories of the kick-ass tunes that helped define my childhood. Reminiscing about Weezer today, though, just brings me one step closer to cardiac arrest.
Everything okay?
I mean, where did it all go wrong? Seriously, what happened to the Weezer that we used to know? No, I'm not doing a go-to parody. I'm not. It's played out, Internet. Time to move on. Well, if we're gonna talk about this, then we may as well start at the beginning. Weezer was formed in 1992 by frontman Rivers Cuomo, and the band got their start playing on the Los Angeles club circuit. After only 2 years of playing small venues, they were able to score a major label deal when an A&R rep from Geffen Records caught them opening for That Dog. No, not that dog. No, not that dog. No, not that dog either. Yeah, that dog. In 1994, they released their self-titled debut album, produced by Rick Ocasek. Yeah, that Rick Ocasek. Weirdly enough, the album didn't originally have a single planned for release, but after word of mouth about the group got around, they eventually released a video for Undone, the Sweater song. It was directed by then unknown Spike Jonze, and it would go on to be a big hit on MTV. In fact, it was one of Jones's first big hits as a director, and it helped pave the way for a lot of his future projects, such as this.
There's a tiny door in my office, Maxine, and it takes you inside John Malkovich.
This. And of course, this.
I'm such a slut. I like it in my butt. I like sunshine all day long.
Though, personally, the video that I remember most from this album would have to be Buddy Holly. Though, to be honest, it took me a while before I actually got a chance to see the video. Just because when I was a kid, I often mistook it for an actual episode of Happy Days. And that show was freaking terrible. Hey. Oh, shut up, Fonzie. Cop and a Half was a pile of shit. But once I did give it a full sit-through, I was hooked. I mean, just look at the charm and geeky charisma that these guys emanate. This video shows us how cheerfully endearing Weezer can be, and in moments, it's actually pretty funny. Hell, that's way more than I can say about the actual show.
That's not so good, Al.
Not so good, Al.
This video was the one that finally got Weezer the attention of the masses, and after this, sales for the record skyrocketed. The Blue Album peaked at number 16 on the Billboard charts and would eventually go triple platinum in the US. Certainly not bad for a record that didn't even originally have a single. Hell, the video for Buddy Holly got so popular that Microsoft actually included copies of it with Windows 95. Now if that doesn't gain you nerd cred, I don't know what will. Only because Windows 3.1 was a piece of shit. That album wasn't the first.
Talk about Pinkerton!
That album wasn't the first one I'd ever purchased, but it was one of the first albums I ever listened to back to front, completely end to end, and just loved every single track on it. Seriously, every single track on that album is just pure gold. I would pop that album in and listen to it 2, 3, 4 times in a row and not get sick of it. And you know what the best thing is about that album? Even after 18 years, it still has the same effect on me. It's that fucking good, people. Seriously, when I was doing research for this episode, I put this album on for the first time in about 2 or 3 years. But when I did, I was bopping my head and singing along to it like the very first day I brought it home. From the brilliant guitar work and waltzy structure of My Name is Jonas, to the catchy and surprisingly sobering Say It Ain't So, this album hasn't aged a day. The Blue Album is just as much fun today as it was all the way back in 1994. And there aren't a ton of albums I can really say that about.
Cough, cough.
Hell, speaking as a guy who grew up as a geeky, socially awkward guitar nerd, In the Garage was practically the theme song to my adolescence. Well, that November Rain.
Everybody needs somebody. You're not the only one. You're not the
Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, the Blue Album is just one of those classic records that stood the test of time, and ultimately it will become a defining part of
Pinkerton! Talk about Pinkerton!
Okay, alright, god damn it, I'll talk about Pinkerton! Can a guy build a moment? Oh, Pinkerton. You started out as an ugly duckling, but over time, you grew into an elegant, beautiful hipster swamp. Crack? If you're even vaguely familiar with the band, or at least know someone who wears a scarf in the summertime, then you've probably heard all about this album. But for those of you who haven't, a quick refresher. Pinkerton, released in 1996, was Weezer's follow-up to the Blue Album. Originally, it was going to be a space-themed rock opera entitled Songs from the Black Hole, but the band ran into several problems during the writing phase and decided to scrap the idea. One of the biggest problems being that Rivers had just undergone a major leg surgery and was under the influence of several painkillers. So in lieu of writing new material, they decided to record a batch of songs Rivers had written prior to the operation instead. Ah, come on, Rivers. Scott Weiland was blitzed out of his gourd on OxyContin, and he wrote 5 STP albums. Hell, 4 of them were actually good. Man up, homeboy. I would have loved to have seen that space opera. All kidding aside, Pinkerton was an excellent album, and it's another piece of Weezer's catalog that still holds up even after all these years. Hell, if anything, it's only gotten better over time. You can definitely say that this was one of those albums that was ahead of its time, if only because when it was originally released, nobody liked it. I do mean nobody either. A Rolling Stone Readers poll ranked it as the second worst album of 1996.
See, I told you they suck.
Entertainment Weekly called it a collection of get-down party anthems for agoraphobics. And Melody Maker said to ignore the lyrics entirely. It wasn't just the critics who were saying this either. Even the fans weren't entirely sure what to think of this album, at least when it first dropped. And at the risk of losing all my hipster cred, even when I popped it in for the first time, I just didn't get it. You made fun of my scarf, so you don't get to have hipster cred. Quack. Ma. Quack. Ma. Quack. Hey, could you shut up? I'm trying to get the point! Hell, even Rivers himself expressed disapproval of the album up until about 2008. He even went as far as to tell Entertainment Weekly,
It's a hideous record. Such a hugely painful mistake that happened in front of hundreds of thousands of people. It continues to happen on a grander and grander scale and just won't go away. That makes me sad.
The thing is, though, that album wasn't hideous. That album was fucking transcendent. It was amazing. It's a great piece of power pop. It was just the right album at the wrong time. I think I can kind of explain what might have happened here. First off, the album wasn't able to get decent promotion due to a lawsuit that came up with a private security firm of the same name. That temporarily prevented any marketing of the album when it was first announced. Not to mention the video for the first single fell under a lot of problems too. Rivers surprisingly rejected an offer to work with Spike Jonze again, and got into several arguments with the director they eventually chose for the shoot. Actually, since we're on the subject, let's talk about that first single. The band chose El Scorcho to be Pinkerton's leading single, a title which, as you Spanish-speaking viewers know, translates in English to the Scorcho. Yeah, this was a weird song, even by Weezer standards. Don't get me wrong, it's a great tune with a powerful chorus and an insane breakdown in the bridge, but you also have to remember, this was the first taste of post-Blue Album Weezer that we got, and it wasn't what most of us were expecting. Along with the bland, mostly uninteresting video, this song was just too odd. Like, it didn't exactly inspire any of us to trample children underfoot to get our hands on the new album. Myself included. Hell, when I brought home Pinkerton, I was greeted with a collection of songs that just perplexed the hell out of me. Whereas the Blue Album had a light, carefree attitude about it, Pinkerton is much more bleak and depressing. The big themes of this record are loneliness, despair, and frustration. The band was just coming to terms with rock star status, and most of this album is Rivers' deepest, most heartfelt confessions of the ennui and personal torment that fame and success were bringing him. Really? This is probably one of the most earnest and uncompromisingly honest albums I've ever heard from an artist, in a lyrical sense at least. I mean, it just paints this beautiful portrait of a man whose wildest dreams have finally come true, only for him to be crushed under the weight of them. I mean, in its own weird way, it's very poignant and even heart-wrenching. In hindsight, it's actually really touching to see such a deep, meaningful, and honest performance out of an artist. The heart and soul of Rivers Cuomo is splattered across every track of this album like a Jackson Pollock piece. And the emotion here is so unadulterated and uncompromisingly frank that you can't help but feel touched on a personal, emotional, and perhaps even spiritual level. The aching humanity of it all can't help but strike a chord in the humanity of the listener themselves. Also, Get You kicks ass. Here's the thing though. At the time, one of Weezer's biggest appeals to its audience was their fun, lighthearted demeanor. We were just coming out of the grunge era, and every rock artist out there was writing soul-crushing misery guts anthems to absolute depression. Weezer served as an alternative to that though, being fun and whimsical without sacrificing any of that good old-fashioned hard rock edginess. So when good old lighthearted Weezer released an album full of soul-crushing misery guts anthems to absolute depression, well, you can see how it might have turned some people off. This album didn't go away though, and the people who loved it unconditionally. They sang its praises for years and years and didn't give a flying fuck what anyone else thought. And really, I mean, now that we're able to separate the album from the time period in which it was made, and now that grunge has long since died, it's a lot easier to judge Pinkerton by its own standards, by just it being an album, as opposed to it being an album in the grunge era. And let me tell you, that album is so good. It's so timeless. It's so amazing. Like, really, if that album had been released today, I promise you, it would have been a hit. Like the Blue Album, the songs on this record haven't aged a day, and are still endlessly enjoyable. And despite the confusing honeymoon period, a lot of people consider this to be Weezer's best album. It's certainly not without good cause either. Hell, my favorite Weezer song, Pink Triangle, actually comes off of this record, so yeah, I'll definitely stick up for it. Hey, I love that song. I absolutely love it! If only because I can personally relate to it. This album came out when I was in roughly 5th grade, and I was going through my first big crush at that time, and sure enough, she turned out to be a lesbian. You better believe I can relate to Pink Triangle! I mean, she might have just told me that because she wasn't interested, but hey, come on. What girl could possibly keep her hands off of this? Oh, yeah. Bitches line up! Even though this album was a masterpiece, its initial commercial and critical failure caused the band to go on hiatus. At the time, most people just figured that was it for them. Another victim of the old sophomore slump. A piece of 90s nostalgia on the same plane with Saved by the Bell, the O.J. Simpson trial, or slap bracelets. After Pinkerton, Weezer stayed out of the spotlight for over 5 years. Sans a small side project here or there, Weezer was pretty much done in the eyes of most people. But unbeknownst to a lot of us, Weezer was actually spending this time crafting their big comeback album. And that little gem that they dropped in 2001, that little green emerald of an album, that album was actually pretty good. Okay, let's get one thing out of the way right from the get-go. Is this album as good as Blue Album or Pinkerton? Fuck no, it's not even close. But that being said, it's still not bad. Hell, for what it is, it's actually pretty decent. I mean, besides, how the hell was this album supposed to live up to the epic standards of the Blue Album and Pinkerton? It can't. I mean, look at it this way. If the Blue Album is Weezer's Tommy, and Pinkerton is their Who's Next, well, then of course their Quadrophenia isn't gonna be as good by comparison. How the hell could it be? That doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad album, it's just in an entirely different league. This album was more of a return to the Blue Album's roots, straightforward, powerful, and catchy. While I can definitely understand why some people would say that's a little unoriginal, I can't blame the band for taking that route on this album. I mean, yeah, they could have continued to work off of the themes they were building in Pinkerton, but you have to remember, nobody liked Pinkerton. At the time, at least. It was considered the Ishtar of 90s music for a long time, so I can understand why they'd initially want to distance themselves from it. Taking all that in mind, this album is actually a pretty solid, if not simple-minded, collection of kick-ass power pop tunes. Hell, it was just good to see Weezer back after all these years, and coming back heavier and louder than ever before. It was nice to see him again. And even listening to this album today, it's anything but boring or monotonous. Hell, I even like Island in the Sun. You're goddamn right I said it. Yeah, I know. If you hate the Green Album, then this song is probably the bane of your existence. But you know what? I actually dig it. Yeah, it's a sugary little number. Probably a bit too sugary for most. Oh, who am I kidding? This song is so sugary, if you listen to it 5 times in a row, it will give you diabetes. But it's supposed to be that way. It's just a nice, gentle, chill-out song to help balance out the feel of the overall album. I mean, every single Weezer album up to this point had at least one gentle, sweet, romantic song on it to just help make the album feel a bit more balanced. Hell, the Blue Album had Only in Dreams, and even Pinkerton had Butterfly. Some people might also argue that the lyrics are, well, pretty dopey. I mean, as far as love songs go, this isn't exactly Peter Gabriel. God, isn't that a good song? But you know, for a Weezer album, it doesn't feel out of place. Hell, Holiday off of the Blue Album is essentially the same kind of song, and that song kicks ass. It's well constructed, it's catchy as all hell, it has a nice hook for the chorus, and I don't know, I guess I just dig this song. Maybe I don't have a good reason, but this song has never bothered me. It may be shinshy shinshy with a sandpaper dildo to some, but it's never gotten to me for some reason. I just dig this track. In case you were wondering what shinshy shinshy is, by the way,
she was willing to accept her lover's body in places no one had ever trespassed. Specifically, the ear canal.
you're welcome. I will give the haters some credit, though. There are definitely gripes to be had with this album. For one thing, the lyrics are certainly nothing to write home about. Granted, Weezer's never been known for their deep, thought-provoking lyrical style. They have been able to pull off some serious themes, particularly on Pinkerton, but for the most part, their music is more about creating a feel for a song, rather than actually making any kind of statement. I mean, the song Buddy Holly is literally about how Rivers Cuomo kinda looks like Buddy Holly. Deep. And that ties into the major problem with this album. The songs don't feel quite as earnest or endearing as they did on the previous records. They're still heavy and fun, but when I'm singing along to a song like Hash Pipe, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what to feel. As bears come to get me 'cause they like my behind? I'll be the first to admit, this album does have its flaws, but I still think it's a solid record. Definitely not one of their best, but it was good enough to make us start paying attention again after all those years. A year later, Weezer followed up the Green Album with Maladroit. This album is actually better than the Green Album. This album is a bit of an oddity in Weezer's catalog, just because you never hear that much about it. Most of the people I know either gave up on Weezer immediately after the Green Album, or they hung in a little bit further than this album, but no one really says too much about this record specifically. And that's kind of a shame too, because it's actually pretty damn good. Not that the album didn't sell well or wasn't well received. Hell, it went gold here in the US, and both Spin and Rolling Stone placed it in the top 10 of their Album of the Year lists. But still, no one ever seems to discuss this record that much. Most of the people I spoke to about it said it was either passable or mediocre. Not much love or hate either way, it's just kinda eh. Which is odd, because this album isn't at all boring or mundane. Again, it's not even close to par when it comes to the Blue Album or Pinkerton, but in my personal opinion, I'd rank it a bit higher than the Green Album. The Green Album was Weezer playing it safe, in hopes of winning back the public's affection after Pinkerton. This album actually takes a few more risks. It's a lot heavier, a lot louder, and a hell of a lot faster than most of the Weezer that we've heard up to this point. Not to mention that this album is also a good example of the range that Weezer is capable of. Yeah, they aren't exactly Rush when it comes to experimentation or anything, but it does show that Weezer is a band that can achieve great things when they do decide to step out of their comfort zone. Songs like Slob and Possibilities showcase a more explosive, rapid-fire sound that almost comes off as punkish. The song Death and Destruction is a great little slow burn that almost sounds like early The Benz era Radiohead. And Burnt Jam? It's downright funky. But then again, it isn't exactly perfect either. I think a lot of the problems with the Green Album actually transferred over to this one as well. The music is fun, but it's anything but deep, and some of that lyrical weirdness from the Green Album actually transfers over too. Fag of the Year? Fag of the Year? Is that a title you can actually win? Is that like something they give out to Harley riders? Yes, I subscribe to the South Park definition of the word fag. What of it? What? Poopin' on your heart? Oh, who put out your heart? Oh, wait, that doesn't make any sense either. Despite its flaws, I really like this album. Again, it's one of those records that has held up over time, and at the end of the day, it's just a lot of fun to listen to. It's kind of a shame that it's so overlooked. I wouldn't say it's as underappreciated as Pinkerton, but still, it's an album that definitely deserves another spin if you happen to have it lying around somewhere. You know, after that album, I was pumped to see where Weezer was going to go next. I mean, with Maladroit, Weezer began to open themselves up to experimentation again. They were more eager to try new things. And hell, since it didn't absolutely murder their career this time out, there was no reason for them not to expound upon what they'd been doing and develop it. And hell, not to mention, it helped widen their fan base significantly. I mean, I know plenty of people whose first exposure to Weezer was the Green Album. So really, they had nowhere to go but up with this. They'd already sunk to the very bottom. They broke up for 5 years. After everything the band has been through and all the lessons that they've taken away from their experiences, hell, we have no reason to expect that the next Weezer album is going to be anything but spec-fucking-tacular.